The Outer Rim mercenary hub floated in the darkness between star systems. A massive station where the galaxy's soldiers for hire gathered to find their next contract. Inside the main cantina, the air was thick with smoke from a dozen different worlds, and the smell of alien alcohol mixed with the sound of rough voices speaking in countless languages. Commander Vex Thor sat at a corner table, his scaled fingers moving across his datapad as he scrolled through available contracts. The Krillian mercenary had seen 20 cycles of combat across the galaxy, and his crew trusted his judgment completely. Around him sat his squad, veterans all, drinking quietly as they waited for their captain to find work worth taking. The datapad's screen flickered, and a new contract appeared at the top of the board. Vex Thor's eyes widened slightly as he read the details. 3 million credits. That was enough money to retire on. Enough to buy a small moon if someone wanted. He read further. The target was a human military outpost on a colony world called New Harmony. Only 30 personnel. Light defenses. Should be simple. Vex Thor closed the contract without a second thought and kept scrolling. Around the cantina, other mercenaries were doing the same thing. Datapads lit up across the room as the contract appeared on everyone's screens, and one by one, experienced fighters dismissed it immediately. At the bar, a young Threxian mercenary named Kael Zahn watched this happen with growing confusion. He was new to the hub, fresh from the military academy on his home world, and eager to prove himself. The Threxian had good scores in combat training, excellent marks in tactical planning, and he was hungry for his first big score. When he saw veterans passing up 3 million credits, he could not understand it. Kael Zahn stood up and walked to Vex Thor's table. The young mercenary was tall and confident, his green skin marked with the traditional warrior tattoos of his people. He pointed at the contract on his own datapad. "Commander Vex Thor, I have a question," Kael Zahn said. "This contract for New Harmony. 3 million credits. Why is everyone ignoring it?" Vex Thor looked up at the young mercenary. The Krillian's face was hard to read, but his eyes showed something that might have been pity. "Sit down, boy. You are new here, so you do not know." "Know what?" Kael Zahn asked, sliding into a seat at the table. "The target is just 30 humans. We could take 80 mercenaries and have nearly a 3-to-1 advantage. The payout would make us all rich." A low rumble of dark laughter went around the table. One of Vex Thor's crew, a Dravian soldier named Kresh, shook his head. "You want to fight human special forces? You want to die, just say so. It is faster." "Human special forces?" Kael Zahn repeated. "The humans have only been in space for 20 cycles. Their technology is primitive compared to most species. They still use projectile weapons instead of plasma rifles. How dangerous could they be?" The cantina had grown quieter. Other mercenaries were listening now, and several of them were looking at Kael Zahn the way you might look at a dead man. An old Vorgothi warrior at a nearby table, missing 3 of his 6 arms, turned to face the young Threxian. "Dangerous enough that I lost these arms fighting them," Greshmal said, his voice rough like grinding stone. "Dangerous enough that the Valdris Syndicate, the most feared mercenary company in 5 sectors, lost 200 soldiers trying to capture 8 of them. Dangerous enough that there is an unwritten rule in every mercenary guild, from here to the core worlds. Never accept contracts against human special forces." Kael Zahn looked around the cantina. Every veteran mercenary was nodding in agreement. Some looked angry at the memory. Others looked frightened. But all of them clearly believed what the old Vorgothi was saying. "I do not understand," Kael Zahn said. "They are just soldiers." Greshmal stood up slowly, his remaining 3 arms supporting his weight as he moved to Kael Zahn's table. The old warrior sat down heavily and stared at the young mercenary with eyes that had seen too much death. "I will tell you a story, boy," Greshmal said. "I will tell you about the Valdris incident, and maybe you will understand why we do not fight human special forces. Maybe you will be smart enough to learn from other people's mistakes instead of making your own." The cantina was silent now except for Greshmal's voice. Even the bartender had stopped serving drinks to listen. This story was told in the mercenary hubs across the galaxy, passed from veteran to recruit, but it never got old. It was a warning that every soldier for hire needed to hear. 12 cycles ago, Greshmal began. The Valdris Syndicate was at the height of their power. They had ships, weapons, and soldiers that could take on planetary defense forces and win. They were the best, and they knew it. When a client offered them a contract to capture a human diplomatic convoy, they thought it would be easy money. Greshmal's voice filled the quiet cantina as he continued his story. The old Vorgothi warrior stared at his remaining 3 arms, remembering the battle that had cost him the others. The Morning Star was not a warship, he said. It was just a small diplomatic transport, carrying Ambassador Helen Wright to a treaty signing. The ship had basic shields and no weapons. When the Valdris forces disabled the engines and cut through the hull to board, they expected to find frightened diplomats ready to surrender. Instead, they found Lieutenant Jake Morrison and his team waiting for them. Kael'Zan tried to imagine 8 soldiers facing 200 attackers on a disabled ship. The numbers made no sense. Even the best soldiers should have been overwhelmed in minutes. The first wave of Valdris troops entered through the cargo bay. Greshmal continued. 40 soldiers, fully armored, weapons ready. They made it 10 meters into the ship before the humans struck. Morrison's team had turned the cargo bay into a kill zone. They had repositioned cargo containers to create choke points and firing lanes. They had rigged the lighting to fail at key moments. When the Valdris troops entered, they walked into a carefully planned ambush. The old warrior's voice grew harder. Staff Sergeant Kyle Bennett took out 12 soldiers in the first 30 seconds. He was positioned above the entry point, hidden in the maintenance crawl space. The Valdris troops never saw him until it was too late. By the time they realized where the shots were coming from, half their entry team was down. But surely the Valdris forces adapted, Kael'Zan said. With their numbers, they could afford losses. They should have pushed through. Greshmal laughed bitterly. That is what Zarthok thought. He sent in the second wave, then the third. Each time, the humans had moved to new positions. They did not hold static defensive lines like normal soldiers. They flowed through the ship like water, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the Valdris troops could respond. The humans knew every vent shaft, every maintenance tunnel, every hidden passage in their ship. They used the environment as a weapon. The old warrior took another drink before continuing. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez was wounded in the first hour of fighting. A plasma bolt caught her in the leg. Most soldiers would have retreated to get medical attention. Rodriguez took a piece of broken bulkhead, wedged herself into a ventilation shaft above the main corridor, and waited. When a Valdris squad passed beneath her, she dropped down and killed 12 armored soldiers with nothing but that piece of metal in her bare hands. The security footage showed the whole thing. It took her 4 minutes. Kael'Zan felt a chill run through his body. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat at the academy. He knew how difficult it was to defeat even one armored opponent without weapons. 12 was impossible. Unless you were human, apparently. The Valdris Syndicate had never faced anything like this, Greshmal said. Their soldiers were trained for conventional warfare, boarding actions, ship-to-ship combat, planetary assaults. They expected enemies to fight in predictable ways. The humans threw out every rule of conventional warfare. They used improvised explosives made from ship components. They set traps using medical supplies and kitchen equipment. One human, Corporal Luis Diaz, turned the ship's water recycling system into a weapon. He flooded 3 decks and electrified the water. 20 Valdris soldiers died before they figured out what was happening. Around the cantina, veteran mercenaries nodded. They had all heard stories like this. Some had experienced it firsthand. Human special forces did not fight fair. They fought to win, using every advantage they could find or create. The worst part, Greshmal continued, was the communication. The Valdris troops had advanced encrypted comm systems. The humans should not have been able to intercept or decode them. But somehow, Lieutenant Morrison's team knew where the Valdris forces were moving before they moved. They anticipated every tactical decision Zarthok made. Later, we learned that one of the humans, Specialist Greg Fisher, was what they call a signals intelligence expert. He cracked the Valdris encryption in the first hour of the fight and spent the rest of the battle feeding false information into their communication network. Kyle Zahn was beginning to understand why the veterans refused the New Harmony contract. These humans did not sound like normal soldiers. They sounded like something else entirely. 3 hours after the boarding began, Greshmal said quietly, Zarthok ordered a retreat. Of the 200 Valdris soldiers who entered the Morning Star, only 60 made it back to their ships, 140 dead. The rest were wounded so badly they could never fight again. The humans lost no one. Ambassador Wright reached her treaty signing on time. The only delay was stopping to repair the hull damage from the boarding action. The cantina remained silent. Every mercenary present knew this story, but hearing it again reminded them why certain contracts should never be accepted. I was there, Greshmal said, and his voice carried old pain. I was part of the assault team that tried to reach the bridge. We encountered a human named Master Sergeant Paul Grant, just one man. He held a corridor junction against 15 of us for 20 minutes. Every time we tried to advance, he drove us back. He used grenades, automatic fire, and when his ammunition ran low, he fought with a knife. I lost 3 arms to that man's blade before my squad dragged me to safety. The old Vorgothi looked at Kale Zahn directly. You ask how dangerous human special forces are? They are the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy, boy. Not because they have better weapons or stronger bodies. Kale Zahn stood at the cantina bar an hour later, studying the New Harmony contract on his datapad. The young Threxian mercenary could not stop thinking about the 3 million credits. That kind of money could set him up for life, give him the reputation he needed to command his own crew. Yes, the Valdris story was frightening, but that happened 12 cycles ago. Things changed. Tactics evolved. The Valdris Syndicate had been caught by surprise. With proper planning and preparation, surely even human special forces could be defeated. The cantina door slid open, and a human walked in. This was unusual enough that several mercenaries looked up from their drinks. Humans rarely visited the Outer Rim hubs. Most of them stayed in their own space, working for their own governments. But this human wore the casual clothes of an independent contractor, and he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged here. The human walked to the bar and ordered a drink in fluent Galactic common. He was not particularly tall or impressive looking. Dark hair, average build, maybe 30 cycles old, but something about the way he carried himself made experienced fighters take notice. This was someone who had seen combat. Danny Pierce, the bartender said, sliding a glass across the counter. Good to see you back. How was the escort mission? Boring and profitable, the human replied. Exactly how I like them. Kyle Zahn studied the human with interest. So, this was one of the few human mercenaries who worked in the independent contractor world. Pierce had a reputation in the hub. 5 cycles of solid work, never failed a mission, never betrayed a client. He was expensive, but reliable. You are human, Kyle Zahn said, moving closer. Perhaps you can help me understand something. Danny Pierce turned to look at the young Threxian. His eyes were careful, measuring. Understand what? Why everyone is afraid to take contracts against human military targets, Kyle Zahn said. I heard the story about the Valdris incident, but that was 12 cycles ago. Surely things have changed. Surely human soldiers are not as dangerous as the stories say. The cantina went quiet again. Danny Pierce set down his drink and looked at Kale Zahn for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but serious. Let me guess, Danny said. You are thinking about the New Harmony contract. 3 million credits to take out a small outpost with 30 personnel. Seems like easy money to someone young and ambitious. How did you know? Kalezon asked. Because that contract has been sitting on the board for 3 days, Danny replied. Every mercenary in 5 sectors has seen it and turned it down. Only someone new and stupid would still be considering it. Kalezon felt his face grow warm with anger. But Danny Pierce continued before the Threxian could respond. Here is what you need to know, Danny said. He pulled up information on his own datapad and showed it to Kalezon. The outpost commander at New Harmony is Major Ryan Fletcher. You see that name? That should make you run away as fast as possible. Why? Kalezon asked. What makes him special? Fletcher is not regular military, Danny explained. He is special operations. His unit specializes in counterinsurgency and asymmetric warfare. They are the soldiers Earth sends when regular military forces cannot handle a situation. They operate behind enemy lines for months at a time, without support. They can turn any location into a fortress and any mission into a victory, no matter how bad the odds look. Danny Pierce pulled up more information. Fletcher's second in command is Captain Lisa Hayes. She has been in combat for 15 cycles. Before her, there is Master Sergeant Ben Carter, who once held off an entire pirate fleet with just his squad and some improvised explosives. Then, there is Lieutenant Sophie Grant, their intelligence officer. She can hack any system, decode any encryption, and find patterns in data that others miss. And those are just the names we know. The rest of Fletcher's team is probably just as dangerous. Kalezon looked at the information, but he was not convinced. They are still just 30 soldiers. I could gather 80 mercenaries. With nearly 3-to-1 odds, we could overwhelm them. Danny Pierce laughed, but there was no humor in it. You do not understand. Human special forces are not trained to fight fair. They are trained to win against superior numbers. Give them time to prepare, and they will turn that outpost into a death trap. They will know you are coming before you arrive. They will have planned for every possible approach, and they will not stop fighting until every threat is eliminated. The human mercenary leaned closer. Let me tell you something about human special forces training. To become one of these soldiers, you start with millions of candidates. Most of them wash out in the first few weeks. The training is designed to break normal people. They are put in situations where failure means death. They learn to operate without sleep, without food, without support. They are taught that the mission is more important than their own lives. By the time they finish training, they are not normal soldiers anymore. They are weapons that think. Kalezon wanted to argue, but something in Danny Pierce's voice made him hesitate. The human was not trying to scare him. He was stating facts, the way you might warn someone about dangerous animals or toxic environments. Human culture celebrates impossible victories, Danny continued. We tell stories about small groups defeating armies, about soldiers holding impossible positions against overwhelming odds. Other species see those stories as tragedies. We see them as inspiration. Special Forces soldiers are taught those stories from the beginning of their training. They believe that 80 mercenaries against 30 of them is not overwhelming odds. It is just a normal Tuesday. Around the cantina, veteran mercenaries were nodding. They had all learned this lesson the hard way. Some had survived encounters with human military forces. Others had watched friends die, trying to collect bounties on human targets. But Kalezon's pride would not let him back down completely. He had trained at the best military academy on his home world. He had top scores in tactics and combat. Surely with proper planning and enough force, even Major Fletcher's team could be beaten. The 3 million credits kept calling to him, promising fame and fortune. I think you are all being too careful, Kalezon said finally. Yes, human special forces are well trained. Yes, they are dangerous. But they can be killed like anyone else. With the right approach, with enough force, 3 days later, Kalezon's strike force arrived in orbit above New Harmony. The young Threxian had managed to recruit 80 mercenaries, all of them young and hungry like himself. They were tired of hearing stories about how dangerous humans were. They wanted to prove that with proper tactics and superior numbers, any enemy could be defeated. The 3 million credit payout would be split among the survivors, and each one dreamed of the wealth and reputation that would come from this mission. New Harmony was a peaceful agricultural colony on the edge of human space. Fields of grain stretched across the northern continent, and small farming communities dotted the landscape. The human military outpost was a simple compound of low buildings on a hill overlooking the main settlement. Surveillance scans showed exactly what the contract promised. 30 human personnel, minimal fortifications, and standard defensive equipment. Kale Zahn stood in the command center of his ship, studying the tactical display. His second-in-command, a Zentari warrior named Drex, pointed to the outpost on the screen. "We should hit them at dawn," Drex said. "Come in fast, from multiple directions. Overwhelm them before they can organize a defense. With our numbers, we can take the outpost in under an hour." It sounded simple, reasonable. Calzone approved the plan and ordered his forces to prepare for the assault. They would land their ships 2 kilometers from the outpost and advance on foot. 80 trained soldiers against 30 humans. The odds were good. What Calzone did not know was that Major Ryan Fletcher had been expecting them. Lieutenant Sophie Grant, the intelligence officer, had intercepted mercenary communications 2 days earlier. She knew about the contract, knew about Calzone's strike force, and had reported everything to Fletcher. The major had 48 hours to prepare. Fletcher stood in the outpost command center, looking at the same tactical display that Calzone was studying. Around him, his team worked calmly and efficiently. They had been in situations like this before, outnumbered, under threat, expected to hold an indefensible position. It was exactly the kind of mission they trained for. "They will come at dawn," Fletcher said quietly. "Grant, what is their most likely approach?" Lieutenant Sophie Grant pulled up terrain maps on her screen. "From the north and east, sir. The ground provides the most cover from those directions. They will want to get close before we spot them." "Which means they will walk right through zones 1 through 5, Fletcher replied. "Carter, are the surprises ready?" Master Sergeant Ben Carter grinned. "All set, sir. We have been busy little beavers. This whole area is going to be very unpleasant for anyone who does not know where to step." For the past 2 days, Fletcher's team had transformed the ground around their outpost into a carefully planned killing field. They dug shallow trenches and filled them with improvised explosives. They set up tripwires connected to alarms and weapons. They positioned remote-operated gun systems in hidden locations with overlapping fields of fire. They even planted false cover positions, places that looked safe but were actually pre-targeted killing zones. Most importantly, they mapped out movement paths through all of this. Fletcher's team knew exactly where they could move safely and where the enemy would be forced to go. They turned their numerical disadvantage into an advantage by controlling the battlefield itself. "Remember," Fletcher told his team, "we are not here to defend a static position. We are here to eliminate the threat. Stay mobile, stay unpredictable, and trust your training. These mercenaries think they can win with numbers. We are going to teach them a lesson about quality versus quantity." The sun rose over New Harmony in shades of orange and gold. Calzone's force landed their ships and began the advance toward the outpost. 80 soldiers moved through the early morning darkness, confident and eager. They could see the human compound in the distance, its lights glowing in the dawn. This was going to be easier than expected. The first explosion came without warning. One of Calzone's scouts stepped on a buried pressure plate, and the shaped charge beneath it sent him flying backward. Before the other mercenaries could react, 3 more explosions ripped through their formation. Soldiers scattered, looking for cover. That was when the shooting started. From positions the mercenaries could not see, human soldiers opened fire with precise, controlled bursts. The mercenaries fired back wildly, but they were shooting at shadows. The humans were there one moment and gone the next. moving through passages and positions that Kael'Zon's forces did not know existed. Within the first 30 minutes, Kael'Zon lost 20 soldiers. The advance stalled as mercenaries dove for cover behind rocks and trees, but the cover positions they chose were exactly where Fletcher's team wanted them. Remote weapons systems activated, firing from unexpected angles. More explosives detonated. The mercenaries who tried to retreat found that their path back was now blocked by fire and obstacles that had not been there before. Kael'Zon crouched behind a boulder, his communication device pressed to his ear, trying to coordinate his scattered forces. Nothing was going according to plan. The humans were not defending their outpost. They were hunting. Master Sergeant Ben Carter moved through the chaos like a ghost. He appeared behind a group of 5 mercenaries, eliminated them with quick, efficient shots, and vanished before their companions could respond. Staff Sergeant Megan Brooks, the demolitions expert, remotely detonated charges that destroyed the mercenaries' vehicles. Without transportation, Kael'Zon's forces were trapped on foot in hostile territory. By noon, the mercenary force was in complete disarray. Half of them were dead or wounded. The rest were scattered, hiding, trying to figure out what went wrong. They had superior numbers. They had good weapons. They should have been winning. Instead, they were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they could barely see. Captain Lisa Hayes moved along the outpost's outer perimeter, her rifle ready. She spotted a group of mercenaries trying to flank around the western side of the compound. Hayes clicked her radio twice, a signal to her teammates. Within seconds, the flanking mercenaries walked into a crossfire from 3 different directions. They went down before they even realized they were being engaged. Kael'Zon, finally unknight, fell over New Harmony. But the darkness brought no relief to Kael'Zon and his surviving mercenaries. If anything, it made their situation worse. The humans had night vision equipment and thermal sensors. They owned the darkness. Kael'Zon could hear his soldiers breathing heavily in the storage building. Some of them wounded. All of them terrified. They had come here confident and eager. Now they were broken, waiting for the end. A radio transmission cut through the silence. It came on all mercenary frequencies, a calm human voice speaking in clear galactic common. Attention mercenary forces. This is Major Ryan Fletcher, commander of the New Harmony garrison. You are surrounded and cut off from your ships. Your vehicles have been destroyed. You have no supplies and no support. I am offering you one chance to surrender. Drop your weapons and come out of your positions with your hands visible. You will be detained, but unharmed. You have 10 minutes to comply. If you refuse this offer, or attempt to continue fighting, none of you will leave this planet alive. This is your only warning. The transmission ended, leaving silence behind. In the storage building, the surviving mercenaries looked at each other. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight to the end. Kael'Zon felt the weight of command crushing him. These soldiers had followed him here. Their deaths would be his responsibility. We still have weapons, one of the Zentari soldiers said. We could try to break through to our ships. There are only 15 of us left, another mercenary replied. Against 30 humans who have been killing us all day. It would be suicide. Unquote. 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 Kael'Zon looked at Drex, his wounded second in command. The older warrior met his eyes and shook his head slowly. We lost this battle before it started. You wanted to prove that humans could be beaten. Instead, we proved why everyone fears them. Now we can die with pride, or live with shame. Choose quickly. Time. 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 Choose. Before Kael'Zon could respond, the building's lights went out. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in red shadows. Then, they heard movement outside. Footsteps, quiet and precise. The humans were closing in. A small object flew through the broken window and hit the floor. The mercenaries scrambled away from it, expecting an explosion. Instead, it was a smoke grenade. Thick, gray smoke filled the building within seconds, making it impossible to see. The mercenaries fired blindly, but their shots hit nothing. Through the smoke, they could hear movement. The humans were inside the building with them. Master Sergeant Ben Carter moved through the smoke like a predator. He could see the mercenaries clearly through his thermal vision. They were panicking, firing randomly, completely disorganized. Carter could have killed them all easily. Instead, he followed his orders. Fletcher wanted prisoners if possible. Dead mercenaries did not spread stories about what happened when you attacked human special forces. Carter swept through the building systematically, disarming mercenaries one by one. He moved too fast for them to track, appearing beside them out of the smoke, taking their weapons, and moving on before they could react. Within 3 minutes, half of the surviving mercenaries were unarmed and on the ground. Staff Sergeant Megan Brooks entered from the opposite side, performing the same mission. The humans worked with perfect coordination, communicating through hand signals and brief radio clicks. They had trained for situations exactly like this thousands of times. Room clearing, hostile extraction, close quarters combat, in limited visibility. This was basic work for them. Kael'Zhan tried to aim at a shape moving through the smoke, but his weapon was suddenly torn from his hands. A human soldier appeared beside him, moving with impossible speed. Before Kael'Zhan could react, he was on the ground, his arms secured behind him. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. The smoke began to clear. Emergency lights showed Kael'Zhan and his soldiers on the ground, disarmed and restrained. 6 human soldiers stood around them, weapons ready. They were not even breathing hard. The entire assault had been completed in less than 5 minutes, and not a single shot had been fired by the humans inside the building. Major Ryan Fletcher entered through the main door, his rifle lowered but ready. He looked at the captured mercenaries without expression. Lieutenant Sophie Grant followed him, holding a medical scanner. "Grant, check them for injuries," Fletcher ordered. "Anyone who needs immediate medical attention gets it. The rest gets secured and transported to holding." "Yes, sir," Grant replied, moving to check on Drex and the other wounded mercenaries. Fletcher looked at Kael'Zhan directly. The young Threxian met the human's eyes and saw something that frightened him more than anger or hatred. He saw calm professionalism. Fletcher was not angry about the attack. He was not excited about the victory. This was just another day of work for him. "You are Kael'Zhan," Fletcher said. It was not a question. "The mission commander. You put this strike force together." "Yes," Kael'Zhan said quietly. There was no point in lying. "You were warned not to take this contract," Fletcher continued. "Experienced mercenaries told you that attacking human special forces was suicide. But you did not listen. You thought you knew better. How many of your soldiers died because of that decision?" Kael'Zhan felt shame burn through him. 65. 65. Dead, Fletcher nodded slowly. "And you learned nothing until it was too late. That is the problem with pride. It makes you deaf to wisdom. Now you will spend the next few months in a detention facility, and when you are released, you will carry this failure with you for the rest of your life. Every mercenary in the galaxy will know that you lost 65 soldiers trying to collect a bounty that everyone with experience knew was impossible." The major turned to leave, then paused and looked back. "We showed restraint today. Our rules of engagement allowed for prisoner capture, if feasible. If the orders had been different, if we had been authorized for full offensive operations instead of defensive ones, your entire force would be dead. Remember that. Remember that we could have killed you all easily, and we chose not to. That is the only reason you are still breathing." Fletcher walked out of the building, leaving his team to process the prisoners. Kael'Zhan sat on the cold floor, secured and defeated, understanding finally what the veterans had tried to tell him. Human special forces were not just skilled soldiers. They were something fundamentally different. They fought with a level of precision, coordination, and efficiency that other species could not match. Captain Lisa Hayes supervised the prisoner transport. As the mercenaries were led out of the building toward detention vehicles, she spoke quietly to Carter. "How many casualties on our side?" she asked. "0, ma'am," Carter replied. "A few minor injuries from traps they set up, but nothing serious. The medics already treated everyone." Hayes nodded. Fletcher's plan worked perfectly. They walked into every trap, reacted exactly as predicted, and never adapted. It was almost too easy. 2 weeks after the disaster at New Harmony, Kale Zahn sat in the same corner of the Outer Rim Mercenary Hub cantina, where he had first heard about the contract. His mercenary license was suspended. His reputation was destroyed. The 15 survivors of his strike force had scattered across the galaxy, too ashamed to show their faces in the professional mercenary community. Every fighter in 5 sectors now knew the story of how the young, proud Threxian had ignored all warnings and led his soldiers to slaughter. The cantina was quieter than usual when Kyle Zahn entered. Mercenaries looked at him, then looked away. No one wanted to be associated with such a spectacular failure. The young Threxian ordered a drink and sat alone, staring at the table. He had spent the past 2 weeks in human detention, treated well, but firmly. The humans had fed him, given him medical care, and then released him with a warning never to return to their space. They had been professional and efficient, just like everything else they did. Commander Vexes Thor approached the table slowly. The Krillian mercenary captain looked at Kale Zahn for a long moment, then sat down across from him. The young Threxian expected anger or mockery. Instead, Vex Thor's expression showed something closer to pity. "You survived," Vex Thor said simply. "That is more than most achieve when they ignore the warnings about human special forces." 65 of my soldiers did not survive," Kale Zahn replied, his voice hollow. "They trusted me. They followed my orders, and I led them to their deaths because I was too proud to listen to veterans who knew better." Vex Thor nodded. "Pride kills more mercenaries than enemy fire. You are young. You wanted to prove yourself. You saw the warnings as challenges instead of wisdom. Now you have learned the lesson that others tried to teach you. The question is whether you will remember it." Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Other mercenaries began to gather around the table. Greshmal, the old Vorgothi warrior, sat down heavily. Danny Pierce, the human mercenary, joined them as well. They did not come to mock Kale Zahn. They came to make sure the lesson was complete, that the young Threxian truly understood what had happened and why. "Tell us about the battle," Greshmal said. "From the beginning. What you saw. What you learned. The story needs to spread so that others do not make the same mistake." Kyle Zahn took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them about the careful planning, the confidence of his strike force, the belief that numbers and firepower could overcome any enemy. He described the dawn assault, how it fell apart within minutes when they encountered the prepared defenses. He talked about the explosives, the ambushes, the way the humans moved through the battlefield like they could read minds. "They knew where we would go before we went there," Kale Zahn said. "Every move we made, they had already planned for it. Every position we took was a trap. We never saw them until it was too late. And then, they were gone before we could respond. It was not a battle. It was an execution." Danny Pierce listened carefully, nodding at certain details. When Kale Zahn finished, the human mercenary spoke up. "What you experienced is the result of centuries of human military development," Danny explained. "You need to understand something about my species. We come from a death world. Earth is not a friendly planet. For millions of years, everything on our world tried to kill us. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. We survived by becoming the best hunters, the best fighters, the most adaptable species on our planet." The cantina had grown quiet again, with mercenaries listening from nearby tables. This was information that could save lives, and everyone wanted to hear it. Human military history is thousands of years of constant warfare, Danny continued. We fought each other in conflicts that would have wiped out most species. We developed tactics and strategies through trial and error, with millions of deaths teaching us what worked and what did not. By the time we reached space, we had refined warfare into an art form. Vex Thor leaned forward, interested. But why are your special forces so much more dangerous than regular soldiers? All species have elite troops. What makes humans different? Selection and training, Danny replied. To become a human special forces soldier, you start with millions of candidates. The selection process is designed to find people with specific mental and physical traits. They do not just want strong soldiers. They want problem solvers, people who can adapt and improvise, warriors who refuse to quit no matter how bad things get. Most candidates wash out in the first few weeks. The human mercenary pulled up information on his datapad, showing images of training exercises. The ones who make it through basic selection enter training programs that last years. They are put in situations where failure means death. They learn to operate in every environment, from Arctic ice to desert heat to underwater. They train to fight without sleep, without food, without support. They are taught that the mission is more important than their own survival. But surely all elite soldiers receive difficult training, Kael'zan said. What makes humans so different? The culture, Greshmal answered before Danny could respond. The old Vorgathi had spent years studying humans after his defeat at their hands. Human culture celebrates last stands and impossible victories. They tell stories about 300 soldiers holding off 1,000,000 enemies, about small groups defeating empires. Most species see those stories as tragedies. Humans see them as inspiration. Danny nodded. That is exactly right. Human special forces are raised on those stories. They believe that being outnumbered is not a disadvantage. It is just another problem to solve. When Kael'zan brought 80 soldiers against Major Fletcher's 30, Fletcher did not see overwhelming odds. He saw a target-rich environment. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to win, and they never considered any other outcome possible. A Zentari mercenary at a nearby table spoke up. I fought human Navy SEALs once, in the outer colonies. 8 of them boarded my ship through a hull breach we thought was impossible to navigate. They moved through our vessel like they owned it. We lost half our crew before we surrendered. One of them, a soldier named Sergeant Chris Palmer, took down 15 of my fighters by himself. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Other mercenaries began sharing their own stories. A Horgoth commander told of losing 300 soldiers to 8 human Green Berets, who held a jungle position for 6 days. A Dravian pilot described watching a single human ranger plant explosives on his ship's engines while it was in flight. Every story reinforced the same lesson. Human special forces were not normal soldiers. They were something else entirely. The worst part, a scarred Threxian female added, is that they show restraint. When they could kill you easily, they offer surrender. They follow rules of engagement even when those rules make their mission harder. If they ever stopped showing that restraint, if they ever fought with the same ruthlessness that some species use, they would be unstoppable. Kael'zan listened to all of this, feeling the weight of his failure grow heavier. He had been warned by the best mercenaries in the galaxy, and he had ignored them all. His pride had cost 65 lives and taught him a lesson he would never forget. What will you do now? Vex Thor, asked the young Threxian. Vex, 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 find a new career. Kael'zan said quietly. I am done with mercenary work. Every time I would see a contract, I would remember New Harmony. I would remember the soldiers who died because I was too proud to listen. I cannot carry that weight anymore. End quote. Danny Pierce stood up to leave. Before he walked away, He put a hand on Kael'Zhan's shoulder. You survived, and you learned. That is more than most achieve. Take the lesson with you. Share the story. Make sure other young mercenaries do not make the same mistake. That is how you honor the soldiers you lost. As the cantina slowly returned to normal conversation, the story of New Harmony began to spread. Within days, it would reach every mercenary hub in the galaxy. The New Harmony contract was withdrawn, the client having run out of mercenaries willing to die for credits. The unwritten rule was reinforced once again. Never accept missions against human special forces. On New Harmony, Major Ryan Fletcher and his team returned to their normal duties. They trained, they maintained their equipment, and they prepared for the next threat. Lieutenant Sophie Grant asked if the commander thought the mercenaries would finally stop trying. Fletcher, checking his rifle as the sun set over the colony, gave a slight smile. Some will always try. Young, ambitious, convinced they are smarter than everyone who came before them. That is fine. We will be ready when they come. That is what we do. The small human outpost stood against the vast landscape of New Harmony. 30 soldiers who had earned the fear and respect of an entire galaxy. The legend continued to grow, passed from veteran to recruit in cantinas and training grounds across known space. And somewhere out there, another young mercenary was looking at a contract against human targets, wondering if the stories were really true. They were. They always were. That is because they thought like mercenaries, Carter said. They expected a fair fight. They did not understand that we do not fight fair. We fight to win. As the last of the prisoners were loaded into vehicles, Hayes looked back at the storage building. Tomorrow, they would need to clean up the battlefield, repair the defenses, and write detailed reports. But tonight, they could rest, knowing they had done their job. They had protected New Harmony and its colonists. They had demonstrated once again why attacking human special forces was a mistake that few mercenaries made twice. In the detention center, Kael'Zhan sat alone in a cell, replaying the battle in his mind. Every decision he had made was wrong. Every assumption had been false. The veterans at the Outer Rim Hub had tried to warn him, but he had been too proud to listen. Now he would pay the price for that pride. And worse, he had led 65 soldiers to their deaths because of his arrogance. The 3 million credits suddenly seemed like a very small amount of money for so much death and failure. Stood his terrible mistake. The humans were not fighting to defend a position. They were fighting to eliminate every enemy in their territory. This was not a battle. It was an extermination. The Special Forces soldiers moved with precision and purpose, never wasting ammunition. Never exposing themselves unnecessarily. Always 3 steps ahead of the mercenaries' attempts to counter them. As afternoon turned to evening, Kael'Zhan found himself in a storage building with 15 surviving mercenaries. They were the last of his strike force. 65 soldiers dead in less than 12 hours. The humans had not even tried to negotiate. They had not offered surrender. They had simply and efficiently destroyed the threat. Through the building's broken windows, Kael'Zhan could see the human outpost in the distance. It looked completely undamaged. Not one of his soldiers had gotten close enough to even threaten it. The entire assault had been stopped and destroyed. In the kill zone, Fletcher's team had prepared around their position. Drex, Kael'Zhan's second-in-command, was wounded badly. He looked at the young Threxian with pain and accusation in his eyes. "You should have listened to the veterans," Drex whispered. "They tried to warn us. Now we are all going to die here." Kael'Zhan had no answer. His pride and ambition had led these soldiers to their deaths. The 3 million credits meant nothing now. All that mattered was survival, and that was looking less likely with each passing moment. Cautery as possible. Danny Pierce sighed and shook his head. "If you take this contract and somehow survive, you will never take another one against human military targets. The experience will teach you what words cannot. The only question is whether you will be alive to learn the lesson." Kael'Zhan stood up from the bar. His decision was made. He would put together a strike force, plan the mission carefully, and succeed where others had failed. 3 million credits, and a reputation as the mercenary who defeated human special forces. It was too tempting to resist. R. As the young Threxian left the cantina to start recruiting his team, Greshmal watched him go with sad eyes. The old Vorgothi had seen this before. Young, proud, convinced that they were smarter than everyone else. Usually, they did not survive to learn from their mistakes. Should we try to stop him? Vexthor asked quietly. We cannot save someone from their own foolishness, Greshmal replied. We can only hope he learns the lesson before it kills him. They are dangerous because they refuse to quit. They are dangerous because they see impossible odds as just another problem to solve. They are dangerous because their entire culture teaches them that 8 people can beat 200 if those 8 people are willing to do whatever it takes to win. Kylzon sat back in his chair, processing everything he had heard. The story seemed impossible, but Greshmal's missing arms were proof that it was real. Around the cantina, other mercenaries were returning to their drinks, the lesson delivered once again. The security footage from the Morning Star is available on the mercenary networks, Vexthor added. Every fighter in the galaxy should watch it before they even think about taking a contract against human military targets. It will save your life. But Kylzon's pride was wounded. He was young and ambitious, and admitting that humans were so much better than other species' soldiers felt like admitting weakness. Somewhere in his mind, a dangerous thought was forming. Maybe the Valdris Syndicate just made mistakes. Maybe with better planning, with overwhelming force, even human special forces could be beaten. It was the kind of thought that got young mercenaries killed. Kylzon leaned forward, listening carefully. Around the cantina, other mercenaries were quiet, some of them mouthing the words, along with Greshmal, because they had heard this story before. But they listened anyway, because the lesson was important enough to repeat. The target was a small transport ship called the Morning Star. Greshmal continued. It carried a human ambassador and her security detail. Intelligence said the security team was 8 soldiers from a human unit called Delta Force. The Valdris Syndicate sent 200 of their best fighters. They had advanced weapons, tactical shields, and cloaking technology. Their leader was Zarthok, a brilliant strategist who had never lost a mission. The old Vorgothi paused to take a drink, and the silence in the cantina stretched tight. Kylzon wanted to ask what happened next, but something in Greshmal's face made him stay quiet and wait. They set up the perfect ambush in the Kepler belt, Greshmal said. They disabled the Morning Star's engines and boarded the ship. They expected the humans to surrender immediately. After all, they had overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. What could 8 soldiers do against 200? Greshmal's eyes grew distant, remembering everything. They could do everything.